But before we get into it, I actually want to start with the headlines that came out last week. And I don't know whether you were sort of predicting them or whether you were surprised by it. I don't know. But the comments about the World Cup, I think it was a week or so ago, and you said you felt like you'd let England down, which was certainly quite a curious thing to read because it was not something that as a journalist out there or a fan, I think anyone would have noticed. Why did you say that?
I think what people saw obviously on the pitch was different to what happened behind closed doors. Obviously, it's something that is, I guess, pretty close to my heart. But I felt that in the lead up to training camps and to the actual World Cup, felt like that I caused a bit of divide within the group just by some of my actions. Me personally, not just with the players, but as coaches as well. And like I said, when the headlines came out, I actually talked to the people that it affected. Obviously, talked to Eddie and talked to players way before we went into lockdown. And after the World Cup, it makes you think. When you lose, it makes you think like what you could have done better, what you did do well. And for me, that was certainly something I could have done better was the relationship within the group. I essentially affected a lot of them, and that's just how I saw it. But it's one of those things you move on from and learn from.
If you've put it to bed, are you happy to sort of elaborate on that?
It's tough for me to elaborate because it affects other people as well. Okay. And obviously it's something that I said when I did the media interview that it was pretty close to my heart. And the one guy I would say I talked to was pretty obvious was Eddie. It's something that I felt that I did that affected the team essentially.
We had Eddie on last week. I don't know if you saw it or not, but he actually had. I mean, we asked him about it, and I think he was understandably defensive about it. But for our viewers and listeners, we're just going to play in the clip. This is what Eddie said about it last week.
The great thing about Billy is that he's honest, and everyone enjoys his honesty. And I think, like everyone else, he's had a great time to reflect, and I think he's reflected on the period of the World Cup. And I don't think there's anyone at the World Cup that would suggest that Billy didn't give his best. There wouldn't have been a player, staff member who didn't think Billy gave his best, and he did. But he's been reflective, and I think he understands, and I think all of us are feeling this, how much we've missed playing for England and how much gratitude we have to have the opportunity to play for England. And I think that's what he's saying.
I'm interested to know how you feel you've sort of what you've learned from that experience.
I think the one thing I said in my interviews was that the biggest thing is getting ahead of myself. It's one thing I struggle with all the time. My agent will probably back me up on this is, I guess, a bit of complacency in the things that I do, or if things go well for myself, I just feel unstoppable or feel invincible. Whereas it might rub off on other people in a good way, it might rub other people out the wrong way. And I think for myself, I realised that I have way more influence than I think that I have. I still think that I'm the 21-year-old that turned up to training and forgot my boots and had to borrow Haskell's for an international training session. That's where my head's at. But I'm not that guy anymore. My wife hammers me all the time because I forget that I'm 27 and not 21. And that's kind of where the origin of what I'm saying started from, was just being complacent with myself and also the influence that I had on the group. And like I said, it affected the team dynamics in a negative way rather than a positive.
You are so wonderfully open, and I remember this from the last show as well. I think you were very open about sort of perhaps the partying and the going out, etc. I just wonder now, have you got a good network around you? That you mentioned your wife, and certainly Hask benefits from having a very strong presence on his shoulders. Have you got that network now, you think, that is actually helping you, in these circumstances?
Yeah, I do. I definitely have a stronger network now, especially my wife back. But something that I'll always battle with, and the biggest thing is, I get myself into a place where I feel guilty if I go, like you said, partying. It's my weight, my faith, like all these things go on in my head, and I look at other people who are hungover, and I'm like, I wish I could just be hungover. Thing is, when I go out, it's not just go out for a few, like 2 or 3 drinks. It's go out and don't stop until 2 or 3 days' time. That's kind of where my problem starts creeping up on me from, and it's either like all in or all out, and that's something that I need to work on and something that I'm constantly battling against. But it's not a battle, it's just something that I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and be a good person, and sometimes it gets to me.
I'm interested just by that because you are a good person. I think most successful people are racked with those demons. If you didn't have the voice that said after you've been on the piss, or you have missed a training session, or you've forgotten your boots, that wasn't right and that wasn't professional, you wouldn't be as successful as you are. I never, for the long part of my career, you knew that, even before you started drinking, I would hardly go out a lot of times because I'd be racked by guilt. If I went out, I'd have to train the next day. I was never satisfied. And I think it's interesting you say about your, not when you get complacent, but sometimes that knife edge of feeling invincible is what makes you one of the best players in the world. And is it? If you looked at doing some psychology stuff as well, I know you use faith as a tool, but speaking to psychologists and harnessing that, because it's a fine line between success and failure, that, and you don't want to eradicate the feeling of being, invincible. No,
it's something that I certainly looked into when I was younger, whereas now I think for me what makes it easier is kind of putting it out there and talking about it, rather than whether it's the media or whether it's my wife or my parents. I'm pretty open book, and like you said, you're right. It does make me, when I feel like that, it makes me a better player. The danger is just like carrying on basically, when, I need to know where the line is, in terms of where my head's at, in terms of, say for example, we won the double and here I am thinking I'm the man, which I wasn't. And then that influenced things off the field, in the World Cup camp, and other things that led to other players being affected negatively. And that's something that I shouldn't have done, and something that, like I said, I reflected on and talked to those people. And that's where I think it's not a good thing.